The council chamber gleamed with crystalline walls that caught the light of Talvariz's pale sun, refracting it into rainbows that danced across the assembled delegates. Rows of alien representatives filled the amphitheater, their scaled, feathered, or chitinous faces unreadable to human eyes. At the chamber's center stood Ambassador Jonathan Reeve, tall and composed, his sharp features marked by the strain of years spent threading impossible compromises. He adjusted the cuff of his dark suit, the single Terran emblem on his lapel catching the light, and cleared his throat into the echoing silence. We have endured the raids. We have counted the bodies. Yet here I stand again pleading for reason. His voice was firm, carried by conviction more than volume. The Tervak assaults have not ceased. 3 colonies attacked in 6 months, thousands dead, families torn apart. We ask, no, we demand, that the Council fulfill its purpose and stop this slaughter. His words were translated into dozens of tongues, rippling outward in tones both musical and harsh. Across the chamber, some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others showed no reaction at all. High Chancellor Zadran of the Vathari, a serpentine figure with iridescent scales, lifted his narrow head. Ambassador Reeve, your accusations are well worn. The Tervak deny formal responsibility. The Council sees insufficient proof that these incursions are sanctioned by their High Nest. Skirmishes on the frontier happen. It is the cost of shared space. Reeve's jaw tightened. He had expected as much. He looked to the left, where the Tervak representative sat behind a translucent barrier, mandibles twitching in amusement. The insectoid's faceted eyes reflected the chamber's light, unblinking. To Reeve they seemed to sparkle with mockery. He knew they wanted him to erupt, to lose control, to confirm the image of humans as volatile primitives. Instead, he forced calm into his tone. You call 50,000 civilians slaughtered at Lyra Station a skirmish? His voice cut through the hall. Homes burned, children devoured alive in front of their parents? Is that how the Council defines border disputes? The chamber stirred with murmurs. Some alien envoys avoided his gaze. Others, like the reptilian Thraxan and the pale avian Sariti, watched intently, perhaps measuring whether humanity's outcry was weakness or the prelude to something darker. Jonathan felt the weight of their eyes, the hunger of predators circling prey, but he pressed on. Humanity has bent over backwards to fit within your codes of civility, he continued. We accepted your trade restrictions. We abided by your endless bureaucracy. We restrained our defenses because you warned us of frightening the neighbors. But restraint has become our noose. You mistake patience for weakness. He let his gaze fall once more on the Tervak delegate. And weakness invites predators. A low hiss rose from the insectoid's mandibles, unmistakably laughter. The sound burrowed into Reeve's ears like crawling worms. He thought of the reports from the frontier, the images he could never erase. Skeletal remains half-charred in burned-out shelters, twisted cradles empty in ash. He thought of Colonel Holt's last transmission, voice hoarse, uniform shredded, describing how his men fought tooth and nail just to hold a mining outpost until reinforcements arrived. The weight of it pressed against his ribs, a constant reminder of why he stood here. The High Chancellor's voice slithered back into the chamber. Ambassador, peace requires compromise. Perhaps the Terran colonies extend too aggressively. If your species cannot endure border friction, perhaps you are not ready for the responsibilities of interstellar society. Reeve let silence hang for a heartbeat, steadying his breathing. He wanted to lash out, to curse them all for their cowardice, but he knew every syllable he spoke now mattered. Slowly he spread his hands, palms open. We are not asking for favors. We are asking for justice. If the Council will not act, if it chooses to look away while our people are butchered, then hear this clearly, humanity will not remain silent forever. We want to remain civilized. Do not force us to remember what we can be when civilization fails. A ripple passed through the chamber, sharper this time. Some delegates shifted with unease. Others narrowed their eyes, their translations confirming the undertone of warning in his words. The Tervak envoy tilted its head, clicking mandibles in disdain. No reply came from that quarter. Instead, the High Chancellor rapped a jeweled claw on the dais, signaling the session's end. The Council will deliberate. Until then, Ambassador, control your passions. That will be all. The crystalline walls dimmed, the refracted rainbows fading as power conduits hummed down. Delegates filed out in waves of color, scent, and sound. Reeve remained a moment longer, his reflection fractured across the crystal panels. For years he had carried the hope that patience and dialogue could carve humanity a respected place among these powers. But now, in the hollow silence of the chamber, he wondered if hope had become delusion. Outside, the halls of the spire stretched high, vaulted ceilings carved with glyphs from civilizations older than Earth's first cities. Reeve walked them alone, his footsteps echoing. He replayed the faces of the delegates in his mind, the dismissive curl of the Vathri's lips, the cold hunger in the Tervak's eyes. They had already decided. They would do nothing. The realization left a taste like iron at the back of his tongue. Far across the void, Colonel Adrian Holt crouched behind a shattered wall on the frontier world of Darius IV, the dust of collapsed stone clogging his throat. Plasma fire cut through the ruins, searing arcs that hissed past his men as they returned bursts of rifle fire. He barked orders, his voice raw. "Hold that flank. Don't let them through." His squad was down to half strength, their armor scorched, but still they held. Every inch of ground was contested with blood. The Tervak came in waves, screeching as they surged over rubble, and Holt's men cut them down in disciplined volleys. Yet still they came. As night fell on Darius IV, Holt looked skyward between bombardments, the alien stars unfamiliar to him. Somewhere far beyond them he knew Reeve was speaking for humanity. He wondered if anyone was listening. He wondered how many more civilians would die before anyone, decided words were no longer enough. Back on Talvaris, Reeve returned to his quarters overlooking the city's crystalline spires. He sat heavily at his desk, hands trembling only when no one could see. He drafted his report to Earth, each word chosen with painful care. He described the Council's indifference, the Tervak's open mockery, the implication that human colonies themselves were to blame for their suffering. He closed with a single sentence: "We have asked, begged, and reasoned. They are not listening. Something must change." The next morning, the Council convened again, but this time the session was interrupted midway by an urgent transmission. The chamber's walls lit up with the flickering projection of a burning settlement, flames consuming domes and spires as screams echoed in the background. Identification codes flashed. Colony Erivos Beta. Population, 50,000. Status, destroyed. The recording cut to silence, broken only by the chittering laughter of Tervak soldiers, their mandibles slick with gore. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. Some delegates looked away. Others watched with calculated detachment. Jonathan Reeve stood frozen, the image seared into his mind. He thought of the faces he had seen during his last visit to Erivos Beta. Minors shaking his hand, children pressing shyly against their mother's skirts, men offering him bread from freshly baked loaves. 50,000 voices snuffed out, dismissed as border friction. He turned slowly toward the Tervak delegate, whose mandibles clicked in smug amusement. No mask of diplomacy could hide the glee shimmering in its faceted eyes. Rage boiled through Reeve's chest, hotter than anything he had felt before. For a moment, his hands trembled with the desire to leap across the barrier and choke the laughter out of the insectoid's throat. Instead, he clenched his fists at his sides until the tremors stopped. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but the chamber stilled to hear it. "You have mistaken our patience for cowardice. You believe restraint is weakness. You believe civilization is a leash." He let the words sink in, his eyes locked on the alien's unblinking gaze. "But civilization is a choice we make every day. Do not force us to abandon it, because if humanity stops being civilized, there will be nothing in this galaxy left to stop us." The chamber fell silent. Even the High Chancellor did not move. Reeve turned, his steps echoing in the crystalline chamber, and walked out without waiting for adjournment. Behind him, the murmurs rose again, but he no longer cared. He knew, with an aching certainty, that the Council would do nothing. He knew the Tervak would only press harder. And deep within his chest, a line had been crossed. Somewhere on Darius IV, Colonel Holt stared at the stars, his uniform spattered with alien ichor, his men exhausted but unbroken. In the silence after battle, he whispered to no one in particular, "If this is us civilized, God help them when we're not." Jonathan Reeve sent his final message to Earth that night. It was short, stripped of ornament, every word carved in steel. "They've given us no choice. Prepare the world for what comes next." And for the first time in his long career, as he stared at the stars beyond Talvaris's atmosphere, he found no hope in them. Only inevitability. Geneva Command lay buried beneath the Alps, a fortress of steel and reinforced stone, humming with the ceaseless energy of humanity's last line of defense. Banks of holoscreens illuminated the vast chamber, each displaying feeds from colonies, fleets, and intelligence networks. The air smelled faintly of ozone, charged with the static of layered defenses and desperate anticipation. President Nathaniel Ward stood at the central dais, his broad shoulders squared beneath the tailored black of his office uniform. His hair, streaked with silver, gave him the appearance of a statesman weathered by years of storms. Yet it was his eyes, hard and unyielding, that drew attention, eyes that carried the burden of countless decisions, some of them fatal, all of them necessary. Around him gathered the leadership of Earth's coalition, military commanders, intelligence directors, economic ministers. Among them, the one voice that carried across the chamber without effort was Admiral Kane's. His frame was lean, his posture almost predatory, the long years of command etched into lines around his mouth. Where Ward projected patience, Kane radiated readiness, a man coiled like a spring waiting for release. The silence following Jonathan Reeve's transmission pressed against them all. His words had not been the usual measured report of a diplomat. They had been stripped raw, final, leaving no doubt of what was coming. Ward let the silence linger until it cut, then spoke, his voice deep and deliberate. You've all seen the footage. Erivo's beta lies in ashes. 50,000 civilians gone. The council will not act. The Tervak laugh at us. Tell me, how much longer do we pretend words will save us? Admiral Kane stepped forward, slamming one fist into his palm. Mr. President, with respect, the time for words is done. We've kept our fleets leashed while they've torn our colonies apart. Let me off the leash and I'll remind the galaxy why no one in their right mind provokes humanity. Some murmured assent. Others hesitated. Director Selwyn of Intelligence raised a hand. Unleashing unrestricted retaliation may unify us, Admiral, but it will terrify the rest of the Council worlds. They will see us not as victims defending ourselves, but as barbarians confirming every fear they've whispered behind closed doors. Barbarians, Kane barked, his eyes flashing. They call us that already. They've been waiting for us to break. They expect us to stay civilized while our people are carved apart like cattle. I say let them see what we really are. Ward held up a hand and Kane reluctantly stilled. The president's gaze shifted toward the hollow projection shimmering at the chamber's edge, where Jonathan Reeve appeared in real-time relay from Talvaris. His features were drawn, his suit disheveled, but his voice was steady. Mr. President, I beg you for one last chance, Reeve said. Let me address the council formally. One final warning. If we leap straight to fire and blood, the narrative will belong to them, not us. Let the galaxy see we tried until the very end. Let them know civilization was still our choice, even if they forced us to abandon it. The chamber fell still. Ward studied Reeve's image in silence, his expression unreadable. He remembered Marcus Hale, another diplomat, burned alive years ago by alien hands. He remembered the fury that had followed, and how easily it had been twisted into propaganda. Reeve was right. The galaxy needed to see humanity's final offer, to understand that Earth had done everything possible to avoid what would follow. Ward nodded once. You'll have your chance, Ambassador. One speech. One warning. Then we stop pretending. The chamber exhaled, the decision settling like stone. Kane crossed his arms, jaw tight, but he said nothing. His time would come. 2 days later, the council chamber on Talvaris swelled with delegates. Word of Reeve's upcoming address had spread, and the galleries overflowed with observers, diplomats, and media drones. For the first time in years, the council chamber buzzed not with apathy but with anticipation. Reeve stood once more at the crystalline center. He did not pace, did not gesture. He simply stood straight, hands at his sides, eyes sweeping across the galaxy's assembled powers. When he spoke, his voice carried with a resonance that silenced even the most restless delegates. Honored Council and those who watch across the stars. I'm not here today to beg. I am here to warn. His words cut clean, amplified and translated into hundreds of tongues. For decades, humanity has tried to be what you call civilized. We tempered our weapons, restrained our instincts, abided by your endless rules, even when those rules cost us dearly. We endured your suspicion, your slander, your endless probing for weakness. And still we tried. Still we believed peace was possible. He paused, letting the weight of silence bear down. But peace is not possible when one side laughs as they butcher children. Peace is not possible when predators mistake mercy for frailty. So hear me well. This is our final warning. Stop attacking us or we will stop being civilized. Gasps rippled through the chamber. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. The calmness in it carried more dread than fury ever could. Civilization is a choice, he continued. A choice we make every day, a leash we place upon the darker part of ourselves. But if you force our hand, if you continue to murder our people, we will remove that leash. And when that happens you will not like what you see. For all your weapons, for all your fleets, for all your ancient empires, you have never known war until you have known humanity unbound. Some delegates shifted nervously. Others hissed in derision. The Tervak envoy let out a harsh clicking laugh that echoed against the crystalline walls, but even that sound carried a tremor of unease. Reeve's eyes swept across the chamber one last time. This is your choice. The next move is yours. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving the council in stunned silence. The speech was broadcast across every major channel in the galaxy. On human worlds, it spread like wildfire, igniting hearts long smothered by grief and outrage. In colony plazas, men stood straighter, eyes hardening with resolve. In barracks, soldiers repeated his words like scripture. On the frontier, Colonel Adrian Holt watched the recording on a cracked tablet between battles, his face lit by the flickering glow. He whispered it to his men as they reloaded their rifles. Stop attacking or we stop being civilized. The response from the galaxy came swiftly. Some alien powers issued cautious statements, urging restraint. Others mocked humanity's bravado. The Tervak, predictably, spat defiance, broadcasting footage of soldiers feasting on the corpses of human dead. And then came the hammer blow. Erebos Prime, jewel of the Terran frontier, home to 10 million souls, was struck without warning. The Tervak descended in endless swarms, overwhelming orbital defenses and raining fire on the cities below. Entire districts vanished in waves of flame. Evacuation transports were torn from the sky. Families huddled in shelters that collapsed above them. By the time human reinforcements arrived, Erebos Prime was a graveyard, its surface blackened and silent, 10 million voices extinguished in a single night. The news reached Earth like a blade across the throat. The council's feed stuttered with images of ruin, of mass graves carved into scorched soil, of human children stacked like refuse in alien trenches. Entire continents fell silent, stunned into mourning. Then, slowly, grief hardened into something else. At Geneva Command, President Ward stood once more before his council, his voice low but ironclad. We gave them a final warning. They chose to spit on it. No more words. No more restraint. The time has come. Admiral Kane rose, his eyes burning with long-suppressed fire. Then unleash us. Let the galaxy see what happens when we stop holding back. Colonel Holt, patched through by secure channel, stood battered and bloodied from another frontier skirmish. His uniform was torn, his rifle resting against one shoulder, his eyes hollow but alight with grim certainty. Mr. President, he said, his voice steady despite exhaustion, my men are ready. Every soldier I've got wants the same thing. Justice. Vengeance. Whatever you want to call it. Just give the word. Ward looked around the chamber, at the men who had waited years for this moment, at the ministers who knew the cost, at the weight of history pressing down on them all. His next words would echo across centuries. Then hear this, he said, each syllable deliberate, carved in steel. Civilization was our choice. They made their choice. Now we show them what humanity becomes when civilization ends. In the silence that followed, no one spoke. No one needed to. The decision was made. The leash was broken. Far across the stars, the Tervak celebrated what they thought was another victory. They did not yet understand the storm they had unleashed. The fleet hung in silence above Earth, a constellation of steel. From the surface, the night sky shimmered with the glint of warships arrayed in orbit, hundreds of vessels forming a lattice of resolve. For years they had been kept in check, their full strength hidden behind treaties, limits, and diplomacy. Now, with Erebos Prime gone, the chains were broken. Admiral Victor Kane stood at the command deck of the flagship Resolute Dawn, his hands clasped behind his back. The tactical display bathed his face in pale blue light, rendering his features stark and severe. Before him stretched humanity's war machine, carriers bristling with fighter wings, cruisers armed with rail cannons the length of city blocks, stealth corvettes waiting in silent formation. Each one hummed with readiness, every crew driven by grief sharpened into rage. Status, Kane ordered, his voice cutting through the deck. Fleet at full readiness, replied Commander Lasker, his tone clipped. Jump coordinates locked. Colonies report volunteer surges, crews at 110% strength. Kane allowed himself a thin smile. Then it begins. Operation Ashfall is green. The order rippled outward. Engines ignited with a roar that shook the void, and one by one ships disappeared into the folds of faster-than-light space. A storm had been unleashed, and its first target lay deep within Tervak-held territory. On the frontier, Colonel Adrian Holt watched from the surface of Darius IV as the skies tore with the flash of departing warships. His garrison had held the line for months, bloodied and exhausted, yet still standing. The men around him looked up at the heavens, their faces alight with something Holt had not seen in too long: hope. He pulled his helmet on, the scar along his jaw catching the light, and addressed his platoon. "They've had their fun. Now it's our turn." The first strike came swift and merciless. Tervak fleets guarding the mining world of Klithos barely registered human arrival before being obliterated. Kinetic projectiles, dense tungsten rods accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punched through capital ships like paper. Human fighters swarmed with ruthless precision, carving through alien formations as though executing a drill rehearsed 1,000 times. Communications scrambled, command ships severed, the swarm broke apart in panic. Within an hour, the system was silent but for drifting wreckage. The assault did not stop. Human fleets split into task forces, striking world after world. Orbital bombardments lit the skies of outlying hives, reducing fortresses to smoking craters. Stealth units infiltrated deep into Dominion space, hijacking supply relays and collapsing entire logistics networks. Where once the swarm surged outward with endless hunger, now it staggered, cut off and gasping. Every broadcast carried the same message, repeated in cold tones across open channels: "We warned you. Stop or be stopped." Admiral Kane oversaw the campaign with ruthless efficiency. He did not revel in slaughter, nor did he flinch from it. Each strike was precise, targeted, and devastating. When reports came in of alien commanders attempting to surrender, he accepted without hesitation. But when resistance continued, his orders were absolute. Erase them. On Darius IV, Holt finally received reinforcements. Dropships roared down from the clouds, disgorging fresh divisions clad in the newest exoskeletal armor. Human Marines advanced with a speed and brutality that stunned even the veterans. Holt led from the front, charging into shattered hives with rifle blazing, his men following his example with grim fervor. He cornered a Tervak commander in the ruins of a hive throne room, its mandibles clacking in fury. The alien hissed a challenge, barbed limbs raised, but Holt's reply was steady, almost cold. "We begged you to stop." He raised his sidearm and fired point blank, the shot echoing like a verdict. "Now we'll make you." The war escalated, and with it the galaxy began to watch in horror. Alien news feeds broadcast images of Tervak cities burning, fleets shattered, entire hives drowned in fire. For centuries the swarm had been feared as unstoppable predators, but now they reeled under human retaliation. Species that had once dismissed Earth as fragile began to whisper among themselves. If this was humanity when restrained, what would they become unshackled? At the Council on Talvares, Jonathan Reeve stood again before the delegates. This time he did not plead. He carried no notes, no proposals. He simply allowed the broadcast to play behind him. Tervak fleets torn apart, soldiers surrendering, entire strongholds leveled. The chamber filled with the sounds of war, and the delegates shifted uneasily. "You forced our hand," Reeve said, his voice low but carrying. "We asked for peace. We offered warning. You refused. What you see now is not cruelty. It is inevitability." The Sari-T delegate, feathers ruffling in agitation, leaned forward. "Ambassador, what will stop you? If humanity unleashes this storm, how do we know it will end with the swarm?" Reeve met his gaze without blinking. "That depends on whether anyone else mistakes mercy for weakness." The implication hung in the air, sharp as a blade. No one pressed further. Meanwhile, Admiral Kane prepared the fleet for the decisive strike, the Battle of Wyararthal. Intelligence had identified it as the central node of Tervak logistics, the hub from which their fleets launched. Destroying it would shatter the swarm's ability to coordinate. Kane studied the display, his expression carved in stone. "Every ship they have will be there," Lasker warned. "Good," Kane replied. "Then we end this in one blow." The battle erupted with a fury unseen in generations. Tervak fleets swarmed in numbers beyond counting, chittering war cries filling open channels. But humanity did not falter. Cruisers formed phalanxes, rail cannons unleashing storms of fire. Fighters dove in lethal spirals, tearing through swarms with ruthless precision. For every human ship lost, 10 Tervak burned. Captain Daniel Rourke, commanding the Valor's Edge, fought at the spearhead. His ship took the brunt of the assault, shields failing, hull burning. Yet still he pressed forward, driving straight into the heart of the alien formation. "Target their command hive ship," he ordered. "But sir, our hull?" "Do it." The Valor's Edge plunged through enemy fire, its cannons blazing. With its final reserves, it rammed straight into the hive ship, detonating in a burst of light that lit the void. The Tervak command fractured, their fleets thrown into chaos. Human ships surged forward, cutting them down like wheat before the scythe. When the smoke cleared, Wyarthal was silent. The swarm's fleets drifted in ruins, their command shattered, their hub aflame. Humanity had not just won a battle. They had broken the Predator's spine. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, Kane stood unmoving, watching the wreckage scatter. Around him, officers cheered, but his face remained hard. Signal Earth. Wyarthal is ours. Back on Darius 4, Holt received the news over a crackling channel. He looked around at his men, faces streaked with sweat and blood, and gave a single nod. One step closer. But it's not over yet. At Talvares, Jonathan Reeve received the report with grim satisfaction. He knew the galaxy was watching, and he knew what they saw: humanity unleashed, unstoppable. He stepped before the council one last time, his voice measured. "The storm has only begun," he said. "You asked what would happen if we abandoned civilization. Now you have your answer. We did not want this war. But we will finish it." The chamber was silent. The delegates shifted, some in fear, others in awe. And above them all, the broadcast from Wyarthal replayed again and again, the image of a human ship plunging into fire, tearing down a hive with its own death, proof that humanity would go further, fight harder, endure longer than any species imagined. Far away, in the shattered remnants of their empire, the Tervak trembled. For the first time in their history, the Predators had learned fear. And Earth, unbound, was not finished yet. The war had reached its zenith. Where once the Tervak dominated star charts with endless hive worlds, now half their empire smoldered. Wreckage of their fleets littered systems that had once been thought impenetrable. Yet even cornered, they clung to survival, their fractured broods rallying in desperate defiance. Humanity pressed onward, each victory feeding momentum, each loss hardening resolve. What began as retaliation had become a campaign for permanence. Admiral Victor Kane stood on the command deck of the Resolute Dawn, watching the swirling holographic display of the final campaign objective. The Tervak homeworld burned in red relief across the screen, its gravity well crawling with ships and orbital fortresses. It was the heart of their civilization, a planet wrapped in hive cities that stretched from pole to pole. If it fell, the swarm would break completely. Kane's jaw tightened. "This is where they either kneel," he said, "or cease to exist." Commander Lasker shifted uneasily beside him. "Sir, sensors estimate their fleet still outnumbers us 3-1. Even fractured, they'll fight like cornered beasts." "Good," Kane replied coldly. "Beasts fight. Men finish." Elsewhere, Colonel Adrian Holt prepared his troops for the ground assault that would follow the orbital battle. His armor bore new scars from the last campaign, streaks of scorched metal layered over older dents. To his men, the damage was a badge, proof of a commander who never led from behind. He stood before them in the drop bay, voice steady. "You've bled. You've lost brothers. But look where we are, standing at the gates of the monster's den. This ends today. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every man who died believing peace was possible. We give them no more tomorrows." The Marines pounded their armor in unison, a thunderous affirmation that echoed off steel. At the same time, Jonathan Reeve walked into the council chamber at Talvares for the last time. No broadcasts played behind him now. No arguments were prepared. He had come for one message only, knowing the galaxy's eyes were fixed on him. "Humanity is at the threshold," Reeve said, his voice low but unshaking. "We gave warning. We offered mercy. Both were ignored. Now the swarm will face the consequence. You wonder if we will stop once the Tervak fall. The answer is simple. Do not force us to make that choice." Some delegates lowered their eyes, others stared with fear. None dared challenge him. Reeve knew the council had already chosen silence over opposition. They had seen the storm. The day of reckoning arrived. Human fleets emerged from FTL across the Tervak system in a storm of light, steel, and fire. The swarm was ready, vast armadas surging forward like tides of claws and plasma. Space filled with shrieking signals, a chaos of alien war cries, but the human response was silent, a discipline that unnerved even veteran Tervak commanders. Then the sky ignited. Rail cannons unleashed storms of kinetic fire that shredded alien capital ships. Drones swarmed in coordinated webs, tearing enemy formations apart with surgical strikes. Carriers disgorged wave after wave of fighters, each squadron weaving through enemy swarms like a single mind. Human warships advanced as a wall of resolve, their losses mounting but their line unbroken. On the bridge of the resolute Dawn, Kane barked orders with the calm of inevitability. Left flank, press them. Center, Holt. Push them into the kill zone. No ship withdraws. Enemy cruisers rammed human lines, detonating in suicidal bursts, but still the advance held. Kane's eyes burned with iron focus. He remembered every fallen ship, every dead officer, every plea for restraint humanity had once offered. All of it had led here. In the chaos, the resolute Dawn carved a path toward the planet. Shields flickered, armor buckled, but its guns never fell silent. Behind it, the fleet surged forward, breaking through layer after layer of enemy defense. When orbital bombardments began, Holt and his men dropped through fire. Pods screamed into atmosphere, slamming into hive cities that stretched like wounds across the planet's surface. The air was thick with ash, the ground trembling under constant bombardment. Tervak defenders poured from tunnels in endless waves, but the Marines advanced with disciplined ferocity, cutting them down street by street. Holt led from the front, rifle spitting fire, his voice a steady anchor in the chaos. Forward. He pressure. No tunnels left standing. They advanced into the depths of the hive, torching warrens, collapsing breeding chambers, demolishing command centers. Holt's squad pushed deeper than any other, cutting straight toward the central nexus. He knew this was more than a tactical strike. It was the symbolic heart of their dominion. If the nexus fell, the swarm's morale would crumble. Back in orbit, the battle raged at its peak. Human fleets were bloodied, hulls torn open, but the Tervak bled worse. Entire broods were annihilated in precise salvos. In desperation, the swarm unleashed their last reserves, titanic war beasts grafted into living ships, spewing fire across the void. Kane's eyes narrowed. Bring the resolute Dawn around. Focus fire. The flagship's cannons roared, joined by a dozen cruisers. The beast ships shattered under relentless fire, their carcasses tumbling into the atmosphere like falling meteors. Kane exhaled once, quietly, then turned to Lasker. Signal the ground forces. They'll have their opening. Holt's squad reached the nexus after hours of brutal fighting, their numbers halved, armor scorched, ammo dwindling. Before them towered the alien command spire, a grotesque cathedral of chitin and steel. Waves of defenders surged to block their path, screeching in primal fury. Holt raised his rifle once more, blood running down his temple, and gave the order without hesitation. Breach it. The Marines surged forward, detonating charges at the gates. The spire split open in a thunderous blast. Inside, the central broodmind loomed, a massive creature wired into conduits, its limbs twitching as it shrieked commands across the planet. It turned its gaze on Holt, its multifaceted eyes burning with alien hatred. Holt stared back, expression grim. "We warned you," he said softly and raised his weapon. The battle that followed was savage. The broodmind unleashed psychic shockwaves that staggered even hardened Marines. Drones poured in from hidden chambers. But Holt's men fought like possessed, pressing forward inch by inch, refusing to yield. When his rifle finally clicked empty, Holt drew his blade and drove it into the creature's core himself, ending its reign with a single thrust. The nexus collapsed around them, the alien scream reverberating across the hive as the brood's link shattered. Across the planet, Tervak forces faltered, their coordination broken, their will crumbling. Human Marines pressed the advantage, mopping up resistance with methodical precision. In orbit, Kane watched the collapse unfold on tactical displays. A rare flicker of relief crossed his face. It's done. Signal the fleet, cease offensive, secure orbit. We hold their heart. For the first time in history, the swarm had been brought to its knees. News spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The predators who once feasted without fear had been humbled, their homeworld cracked, their fleets shattered, their broodminds slain. Humanity stood victorious, but the message was larger than victory. At the council, Jonathan Reeve delivered the final words. The chamber was silent, every delegate waiting for humanity's verdict. Reeve's voice was calm, measured, but its weight was undeniable. This war is over. But know this, the next who raises a hand against Earth will face the same end. We prefer peace. We prefer reason. But if forced, we will stop being civilized. And nothing in this galaxy will survive that choice. The delegates lowered their gazes. No one doubted him. The message had been written in fire across the stars. On the battlefield, Holt stood amid ruins, his armor dented, his face streaked with grime. Around him, Marines gathered the wounded and secured the shattered hive. He looked skyward toward the ships blazing like stars above, and allowed himself the smallest exhale. It was done, but at a cost carved into every soul who fought here. In orbit, Kane remained at his station, surveying the wreckage of an enemy that had once threatened to consume Earth itself. His features were set in iron calm, but beneath them lay the weight of what humanity had unleashed. He gave no speech, only one final order. Bring them home. Humanity had delivered its final warning, and for the first time in history the galaxy understood.